The book of Daniel stands as one of the most unique and powerful books in the entire Bible. Positioned among the major prophetic books in the Old Testament, it combines gripping historical narrative with deeply symbolic apocalyptic visions. It tells the story of a young Hebrew exile named Daniel, whose faithfulness to God placed him in the courts of kings and into the realm of divine revelation. The book is rich in prophecy, theology, political drama, and unshakable faith. To understand the book of Daniel is to see the hand of God moving through the affairs of nations, kings, and even empires, while also speaking personally into the lives of believers. To understand the world of Daniel, we must go back to the 6th century BCE, during a turbulent time in the history of Israel and Judah. The southern kingdom of Judah had repeatedly turned away from God despite the warnings of prophets like Jeremiah. As judgment, God allowed King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon to conquer Jerusalem in 605 BCE, initiating a period known as the Babylonian exile. During this time, many of Judah's nobility and educated youth were taken into Babylon. Among these exiles was Daniel, a young man of noble birth, selected to serve in the Babylonian royal court. His journey would begin in captivity, but his story would rise to the highest echelons of imperial power. Babylon at the time was the center of the world, a city of unimaginable wealth, towering ziggurats and vast learning. But it was also a center of idolatry and paganism, hostile to the God of Israel. The contrast between Daniel's God-centered worldview and the prideful, self-exalting culture of Babylon sets the stage for the central conflicts of the book. The book of Daniel is neatly divided into 2 major sections, and chapters 1 to 6, historical narratives. These chapters recount Daniel's life and his interactions with Babylonian and Persian kings. They include familiar stories like the fiery furnace and the lion's den, but they're more than just exciting tales. They are deeply theological demonstrations of God's sovereignty and protection over his faithful ones. Chapters 7 to 12, apocalyptic visions. The second half of Daniel transitions into symbolic visions about future kingdoms, the rise of evil powers, heavenly intervention, and the final triumph of God's kingdom. These visions contain beasts, horns, angels, and time-locked prophecies, many of which have been debated, interpreted, and studied for centuries. One fascinating feature of Daniel is the language shift. Parts of the book are written in Hebrew, while a significant portion, chapters 2, 4, 7, 28, is written in Aramaic, the common diplomatic language of the time. This structure signals a dual focus on both the Jewish people and the Gentile empires surrounding them. Daniel is not just a book of stories or prophecy. It is a book that teaches core truths about God, humanity, and history. The main themes include God's sovereignty over kingdoms. From the fall of Jerusalem to the rise and fall of Babylon and Persia, the book repeatedly affirms that God is in control of history. Human rulers may seem powerful, but they rise and fall at God's decree. This is especially emphasized in visions where empires are depicted as beasts and are crushed not by men, but by divine forces. Faithfulness in exile. Daniel and his friends represent a model of faithfulness in a foreign land. They resist compromise, refuse to worship idols, and uphold their spiritual disciplines even under threat of death. In every trial, God honors their faith. Apocalyptic revelation. The latter half of Daniel introduces us to apocalyptic literature, a genre filled with symbols, visions, and cosmic battles. This section reveals God's long-term plan for Israel and the nations, leading up to the end of the age. It sets a prophetic foundation that echoes through the New Testament, especially in the book of Revelation. Judgment and redemption. Daniel's prophecies not only warn of coming judgment, but also offer glimpses of hope and redemption. There is always a remnant, always a faithful few, and always a future where God's kingdom prevails. Who was Daniel? He was more than a dream interpreter or a court official. Daniel was a man of intense spiritual discipline, unwavering conviction, and deep humility. He prayed 3 times a day, fasted regularly, and sought God's wisdom in every decision. Despite being in exile, Daniel never abandoned his identity. He was given a Babylonian name, Belteshazzar, educated in pagan schools, and served foreign kings, but he remained fully committed to the God of Israel. This made him both influential and dangerous. Throughout his long life, spanning over 70 years, Daniel served under multiple kings and empires. His integrity earned him the trust of powerful rulers, but it also made him a target of jealousy. Whether interpreting dreams or standing alone in prayer, Daniel's life was a testament to the power of quiet, resolute faith. Though written over 2,500 years ago, the book of Daniel speaks powerfully to our world today. We live in a time of cultural compromise, political upheaval, and spiritual confusion. Like Daniel, believers often find themselves in environments that do not honor God. The pressure to conform is real, but so is the call to stand firm. Daniel teaches us that faithfulness matters, even when no one is watching. It reminds us that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating events in ways we cannot see. And it encourages us to hold fast to hope, even when the future seems uncertain. Moreover, the prophetic insights of Daniel continue to fuel eschatological discussions. His visions about the abomination of desolation, the Son of Man, and the 70 weeks are all foundational to Christian theology concerning the end times. This word deep dive into the book of Daniel will walk through each chapter, unpacking the historical context, theological meaning, symbolism, and practical lessons for today. We will explore the narrative drama in the court of Babylon, decode the prophetic visions with cross-references to other scriptures, reflect on the spiritual disciplines and courage of Daniel and his companions, analyze how God uses faithful individuals to influence kingdoms and history, and offer modern applications for every major event or vision. By the end of this journey, you'll see not just what Daniel saw, but what Daniel believed. And you'll understand how to carry that same faith into your own life, even if the world around you looks like Babylon. In the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign, the winds of history shifted, and Jerusalem was surrounded by the armies of Babylon. The city, once echoing with the songs of worship from Solomon's temple, fell silent beneath the boots of invaders. Nebuchadnezzar, the ambitious and rising king of Babylon, had come not merely to conquer land, but to seize people and power. Yet behind the scenes another hand was at work, the hand of God. For it was the Lord who gave Jehoiakim into Nebuchadnezzar's hand, a divine decision cloaked in political disaster. From the ruins of Jerusalem, the conquerors took more than just gold and silver. They entered the sacred temple of God, seized the holy vessels, items crafted for worship, vessels once filled with incense and offering, and carried them into the land of Shinar. There, in the temple of a foreign god, these sacred objects were placed among idols. To many it would seem Yahweh had been defeated. But this too was part of the unfolding mystery. God was not absent. He was writing a story. Among the spoils of war, the king ordered that the noblest and most promising young men of Judah be brought into his service. These were not ordinary captives. They were the sons of the elite, handsome, intelligent, gifted in learning, and quick to understand. They were chosen to be trained for 3 years in the language and literature of the Babylonians, molded to serve in the royal court. Among them were 4 remarkable youths, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their Hebrew names, each bearing the mark of God, were quickly stripped away and replaced with Babylonian ones. Daniel became Belteshazzar, Hananiah was renamed Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. With each name change came an attempt to redefine their identities. It was more than linguistic convenience, it was psychological conquest. The empire did not just want servants, it wanted loyal minds, hearts recast in Babylonian image. Then came the test. The king appointed a daily portion of food and wine from his own table for the young men. Rich, luxurious, and undoubtedly lavish, the king's table represented prestige, favor, and assimilation. But Daniel felt a quiet alarm in his spirit. The food, likely offered to idols and prepared in ways that violated the dietary laws of his God, was not just a meal, it was a temptation. In a foreign land, Far from temple and priest, with no watchful eye to rebuke him, Daniel made a decision that would mark his destiny. He resolved in his heart not to defile himself with the king's food. It was not rebellion, it was devotion. The battle did not begin in fire or under threat of lions. It began at the dinner table. With quiet courage, Daniel approached the chief official and requested not to eat the king's meat. The official hesitated. To him, Daniel's choice seemed dangerous. Refusing royal provisions could bring wrath, and the official feared for his own life. But Daniel did not argue or demand. He offered a test. For 10 days, let him and his 3 friends eat only vegetables and drink only water. Then, compare their appearance with the others and decide. Permission was granted. 10 days passed. While others dined on the delicacies of Babylon, Daniel and his friends ate simply, humbly, quietly. At the end of the trial, their faces glowed with strength and vitality. Their eyes shone brighter, their bodies stronger than those who had eaten from the king's table. The steward, seeing the results, allowed them to continue their diet. God had honored their stand, but the blessings of God extended beyond physical health. The Lord poured into them wisdom and understanding, granting them insight in literature, science, and the culture of Babylon. And to Daniel, he gave a unique gift, the ability to understand dreams and visions, a skill that would soon shake the empire. When the training was complete and the young men stood before King Nebuchadnezzar, something extraordinary happened. The king questioned them in matters of wisdom and knowledge, and in every field, Daniel and his friends excelled. They were 10 times more insightful than the magicians and enchanters of the kingdom. Babylon had taken them captive, but God had raised them up. They stood not as victims of war, but as vessels of purpose. And so Daniel entered the court of kings, a young exile with an unshakable heart. He had not overthrown an empire. He had not yet faced lions or interpreted dreams, but he had passed the first test, the quiet test of conviction when no one was looking. In the shadows of defeat, in a land that did not know his God, Daniel chose to be faithful, and heaven, watching, took note. The days in Babylon passed, and Daniel, though still young, had already begun to stand out among the king's scholars. Yet the true stage for his destiny would not be a quiet room of scrolls or a banquet of courtiers. It would be a restless night in the king's chambers, a night that would shake the empire. Nebuchadnezzar, mighty and proud, had a dream, but this was no ordinary vision of the night. It struck him with such force and mystery that his sleep fled from him like a bird startled from its nest. He awoke troubled, breathless, disturbed. The dream was vivid, haunting, and yet somehow, as he tried to recall its details, they seemed to slip through his fingers. What had he seen? Why had it shaken him so? All he knew was that it held power, and he would have an answer. So he summoned the wise men of Babylon, magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans. All those trained in the secret arts, those who whispered to the stars and spoke riddles wrapped in ancient tongues. They stood before him with bowed heads and confident voices. "Tell us the dream," they said, "and we will interpret it." But Nebuchadnezzar, suspicious and perhaps already weary of flattery, made an impossible demand. "No," he declared, "you will tell me both the dream and its interpretation. If you do not, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned to ruins. But if you do, I will reward you beyond measure." Panic swept through the court like a desert wind. The wise men stammered, "O king, no man on earth can do what you ask. Only the gods could reveal such a thing, and they do not dwell among mortals." Their wisdom crumbled beneath the weight of a king's wrath. Nebuchadnezzar, furious, issued a decree. All the wise men of Babylon were to be executed. The order went out swiftly, and with it, the shadow of death crept across the city, including toward Daniel and his companions. But Daniel, hearing of the decree, did not tremble. He sought out Arioch, the captain of the guard, and with calm courage asked, "Why is the king's command so urgent?" Arioch explained, and Daniel, without hesitation, requested an audience with the king, promising that he would reveal the dream and its meaning. That night, Daniel returned to his house and gathered his 3 friends. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Together they did not plot or run. They prayed. They cried out to the God of heaven, the one who sees all mysteries and reveals what is hidden in the deep. They sought mercy not only for themselves, but for the lives of all the wise men in Babylon. And in the stillness of the night, a vision came to Daniel. The secret was unveiled, not just the meaning of the dream, but the very dream itself. He saw it clearly, and in that moment, he broke into praise. "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever," Daniel whispered in awe. "For wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." At dawn, Daniel went to Arioch and said, "Do not kill the wise men. Bring me before the king, and I will tell him what he desires to know." Arioch, relieved and astonished, brought Daniel swiftly into the royal presence. The court was tense. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes narrowed as Daniel stood before him. "Are you able to make known the dream and its interpretation?" the king asked. Daniel did not boast. He did not credit the stars or his own learning. He said, "No wise man, astrologer, or magician can do what the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. He has made known to you what shall come to pass in the latter days." Then Daniel began to recount the dream, and the room grew still. "You, O king, saw a great image, brilliant and terrifying in appearance. Its head was of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay." Nebuchadnezzar leaned forward, the memory returning. Daniel continued, "You watched as a stone not cut by human hands struck the image on its feet. The entire statue shattered and became like chaff in the wind. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. The dream had been revealed, and now the interpretation followed." Daniel explained that the statue represented a sequence of kingdoms. The head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar and his Babylonian empire, glorious, rich, and powerful. But it would not last. After him would come a kingdom of silver, inferior, then one of bronze, and then one of iron, strong but divided, symbolizing empires that would rise and fall. Finally, in the days of those divided kingdoms, God would set up a kingdom that would never be destroyed. Like the stone that crushed the statue, it would strike the foundations of earthly power and grow into a mountain that filled the earth. This kingdom would not be built by human hands. It would be eternal, divine, and unshakable. The king sat in stunned silence. Here was a young exile, not a Chaldean sorcerer, not a magician, but a Hebrew revealing secrets no one else could touch. Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of the known world, rose from his throne and bowed before Daniel. He offered gifts in high honor and proclaimed, "Truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets." Daniel was appointed ruler over the province of Babylon and chief of the wise men. At his request, his 3 friends were also promoted to positions of authority. God had taken them from ashes to influence, not because they sought power, but because they sought him, and the stone that struck, the statue. It became more than a prophecy. It was a promise that in the midst of the world's mightiest empires, God's kingdom was already being prepared, one that would not pass away, one that would stand forever. The golden statue rose tall against the skyline of Babylon, gleaming in the desert sun. It stood nearly 100 feet high, a towering symbol of pride and power, forged from the ambition of a king who refused to share his glory with anyone, not man, not God. Nebuchadnezzar, stirred by dreams and shaken by divine interpretation, had not embraced humility. Though he had bowed before Daniel and acknowledged the God of heaven, his heart remained hungry for control. And so he built the image, not with a head of gold alone as the dream had shown, but a statue entirely of gold. In doing so, he made a statement to heaven and earth alike. His kingdom would not end. His glory would not pass. On the plain of Dura, under a sky as cloudless as the king's intentions, the statue was unveiled with pomp and spectacle. A royal decree was issued, and officials from every province of the empire, governors, judges, treasurers, and counselors, were summoned to witness the dedication of the image. It was a gathering of nations, languages, and cultures, a showcase of Babylon's reach and unity under one rule. As the crowd assembled, a herald's voice rang out across the plain. To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, at the sound of the music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not bow shall be immediately cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. It was no suggestion. It was law, sealed with fire. Then the instruments began to play, horns, harps, lyres, flutes, and bagpipes, all blending into a royal sound. As if on cue, the crowd dropped to its knees. Across the vast plain, bodies fell low in worship, all except three. They remained standing, unmoved, alone. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, once boys from Judah, now administrators in Babylon, refused to bow. Their refusal was not loud, not dramatic, but it was visible. In a world that worshipped image and power, they stood not in defiance of the king, but in allegiance to a greater king, the one who had delivered them, taught them, and remained their only God. It did not take long for the murmurs to begin. Jealous officials, always watching, seized the moment and reported to the king. O king, live forever, they said with flattery. You have made a law that all must bow to the golden image, but there are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who do not serve your gods or worship the image you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar's face twisted with fury. His pride wounded, his decree challenged. He demanded the men be brought before him. When they arrived, he gave them a chance to change their minds. Is it true you do not serve my gods? He asked, barely containing his anger. Now, when you hear the music again, fall down and worship the image. But if you do not, you shall be cast that same hour into the furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? The room fell silent. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego spoke, not with fear, not with trembling, but with calm resolve. O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If we are thrown into the burning furnace, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up, even if he does not. That phrase hung heavy in the air. It was not a lack of faith, it was the fullness of faith. They believed God could save them, but they did not serve him for what he could do. They served him for who he was. Nebuchadnezzar's fury ignited. He commanded the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. It roared like a living beast, its flames leaping into the sky. The king ordered his strongest soldiers to bind the 3 men and cast them into the fire, fully clothed, hands tied. The furnace was so hot that the flames leapt out and killed the very men who threw them in. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell bound into the heart of the fire, but the fire did not consume them. In the silence that followed, Nebuchadnezzar leaned forward on his throne. His eyes widened. His voice broke through the tension. Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? Yes, O king, his officials answered. Then why, the king said slowly, do I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are unharmed? And the 4th, he looks like a son of the gods. A divine presence had entered the fire. The king approached the furnace, shouting into the flames, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. And the 3 walked out, not limping, not burned. Their clothes were not singed. Their hair was untouched. Not even the smell of smoke clung to them. The crowd gathered in stunned silence. Officials and nobles looked on, unable to explain what they had seen. Then Nebuchadnezzar, once defiant, now humbled, lifted his voice and declared, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and yielded their bodies rather than serve any god except their own. And with that, a new decree was made. No one in all the kingdom was to speak against the God of these 3 Hebrews, for no other God could save in this way. The fiery furnace had not just revealed courage, it had revealed the presence of God, not from a distance, not through symbols or dreams, but in the fire itself. And those who stood when all others bowed found themselves walking with the divine. The palace was quiet that morning. Birds circled over the hanging gardens. Servants moved with soft footsteps. The king stood at the window. The great city of Babylon stretched before him, his creation, his pride. Towering walls, glistening temples, the Euphrates weaving through like a ribbon of life. No city on earth compared to it, and in the silence of his own heart, Nebuchadnezzar felt invincible. He was no longer the young warrior who had taken Jerusalem. Years had passed. Empires had bowed. Dreams had been interpreted. Fires had been survived. Yet something remained unyielded: his pride. This time, the story came from Nebuchadnezzar himself. A royal letter went out across the empire, but it was no decree of war or taxation. It was a confession, a testimony of a king brought low and restored by the hand of heaven. I, Nebuchadnezzar, it began, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid. It had begun again with a vision in the night. This time, he saw a great tree, strong and tall, reaching to the heavens. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant. Beasts of the field rested in its shade. Birds nested in its branches. The whole earth seemed nourished by its presence. But then came a voice, a watcher from heaven, descending with a command: hew down the tree, cut off its branches, strip its leaves, scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from beneath it, and the birds from its branches. Only the stump would remain, bound with iron and bronze, left in the grass of the field. And then, as the dream shifted, it was no longer a tree being described, but a man. His heart would be changed, from that of a man to that of a beast. He would dwell with animals, eat grass like cattle, and be drenched with the dew of heaven for 7 periods of time, until he learned that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he pleases. Nebuchadnezzar awoke, shaken. This was no ordinary dream. He summoned his wise men again, but none could interpret it, either from fear or ignorance. So he called for Daniel, Belteshazzar, the one in whom dwelled the spirit of the holy gods. Daniel came, and the king recounted the dream in detail. For a moment after hearing it, Daniel stood silent. His face fell. He was troubled, not for himself, but for the king. Nebuchadnezzar noticed and urged him to speak freely, even if the dream spelled disaster. Daniel bowed and began, "My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and its interpretation for your enemies. The tree you saw, it is you, O king. You have grown great and strong. Your greatness reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the ends of the earth." He paused. The king listened still. "But the decree of the watcher is from the Most High. You will be driven away from men. You will live with the beasts of the field. You will eat grass like oxen. You will be drenched with heaven's dew. 7 times will pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whomever he chooses." Then Daniel, with bold compassion, gave the king a plea. "O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your tranquility." And for a time, perhaps, the king considered the warning. But 12 months passed. The sun rose over Babylon once again, and Nebuchadnezzar, now walking on the roof of his palace, looked over the city with a full heart. His voice echoed in the wind. "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power for the glory of my majesty?" And before the words had even fully left his mouth, a voice fell from heaven, clear, final, undeniable. "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from you." In a moment, everything changed. The crown fell, the mind darkened. The man who had commanded armies now wandered from men. Driven into the fields like a wild creature, his hair grew long like eagle's feathers. His nails curled like bird's claws. He lived among the animals, his royal robes replaced by morning dew. No throne, no servants, no pride, only the silence of madness and the whispers of God in the wind. 7 seasons passed, and then, without ceremony, without announcement, his eyes lifted to heaven. And something shifted. His reason returned. Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes, not in pride this time, but in recognition. He spoke, not to his subjects, but to the one who had humbled him. "I bless the Most High," he later wrote, and I praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing. He does according to his will in the armies of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And no one can stop his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" His kingdom was restored, his officials returned, his honor increased even greater than before. But he was not the same man. The fire of pride had been burned away. What remained was worship. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar," he concluded, "praise, extol, and honor the King of heaven. All his works are truth, his ways are justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble." This was not merely a king's testimony, it was a transformation, not because of defeat in battle, but because of divine mercy and discipline. The tree had been cut down, but the stump had remained, and from it something greater grew. A man, once blinded by glory, now saw clearly. A king, once obsessed with his own name, now lifted up the name above every name. And the God of heaven, who rules over kings, had done it all. The wine flowed freely in the palace of Babylon that night. Music filled the air, laughter echoed through golden halls, and the torches burned high above marble columns. It was not a time for prayer or caution, it was a feast. King Belshazzar, son of Nebuchadnezzar and current ruler of the Babylonian Empire, had summoned 1,000 of his lords for a night of wild celebration. The city may have been surrounded by enemy forces, but inside the palace walls, pride blinded reason. As the evening wore on and inhibitions fell away, the king made a decision, one that crossed the line from indulgence into blasphemy. With a smirk, he gave a command, the sacred vessels that his father had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. Holy cups, plates, and bowls once used in the worship of the God of Israel were to be brought into the banquet hall. And so they came, silver and gold, symbols of reverence and covenant, now reduced to party goblets. The king, his wives, his concubines, and his nobles lifted them high and drank to gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. With each toast they mocked the unseen God whose house they had plundered. But the God of Israel was not deaf to the laughter, nor was he blind to the mockery. In that moment, as the king raised his cup again, something stopped the music. A hush swept through the room as eyes turned toward the palace wall, where a hand, a real hand, had appeared out of nowhere. It moved slowly, deliberately, writing in glowing strokes into the plaster beside the lampstand. No body, no voice, just a hand, and words no one could read. The laughter died. The king's color drained from his face, his knees trembled, and his legs gave way. He called out, shouting for the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers to come at once. "Whoever can read this writing and tell me what it means," Belshazzar promised, "shall be clothed in purple, with a gold chain around his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." But none of the wise men of Babylon could read the words. The language was foreign, but even more so was the spirit behind it. This message was not written in the wisdom of men, but by the judgment of heaven. As confusion and fear spread, the queen, perhaps the queen mother, entered the banquet hall. She had not joined the feast, but had heard of the commotion. Calmly she spoke to the terrified king. "There is a man in your kingdom," she said, "in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, he was found to have light and understanding like the gods themselves. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, made him chief of all the magicians and astrologers. His name is Daniel." Belshazzar sent for him at once. Daniel entered, older now, his face lined by years but his spirit undiminished. He had seen kings rise and fall. He had interpreted dreams and survived lions and fire. Now he stood before a drunken king who knew neither reverence nor history. Belshazzar tried to flatter him. "Are you that Daniel, one of the exiles my father brought from Judah? I've heard you have insight and understanding. If you can read this writing and explain it to me, you shall wear royal robes, gold, and rule beside me." But Daniel, unmoved by offers of wealth or position, spoke plainly. "You may keep your gifts and give your rewards to someone else. I will read the writing for the king and make known its meaning." He turned not first to the wall, but to the past. "O king," he said, "the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar a kingdom, majesty, glory, and honor. But when his heart was lifted up in pride, he was humbled. He was driven from men and lived like a beast until he knew that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men." Daniel's voice sharpened. "But you, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. Instead, you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You brought his vessels into your feast. You praised gods of gold and silver, which do not see or hear or know. But the God who holds your breath in his hand, him you have not honored." Now, Daniel turned to the wall, and this is the writing that was inscribed, "Mene, mene tekel upharsin." The words echoed in the chamber, foreign yet final. "Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians." The silence after Daniel's words was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating. Belshazzar, though shaken, kept his promise. He clothed Daniel in purple, hung a gold chain around his neck, and proclaimed him third ruler in the kingdom. But it was too late. That very night, while the king lay in his robes of honor, and the palace walls still echoed with the fading remnants of revelry, the Persians entered the city. The great Babylonian Empire, once thought unconquerable, fell without a fight, and Belshazzar, king of Babylon, was killed. So ended the reign of the Golden City, not by siege engines or battle cries, but by arrogance, by irreverence, and by the silent hand of God writing judgment on a wall. A new king now ruled Babylon. The mighty empire had fallen, and in its place stood the Medo-Persian kingdom, led by Darius the Mede. Though the name of the empire had changed, its pride, politics, and power games remained the same. And through the shift, one man still stood in the center of influence, Daniel. Though now an old man, Daniel had not faded into obscurity. He had outlived kings and survived regimes. His integrity, wisdom, and spirit had not dimmed with age. Darius, recognizing something extraordinary in him, appointed Daniel as one of 3 top administrators over the entire kingdom. And soon Daniel distinguished himself even above the others. The king planned to set him over the whole realm, but favor often stirs jealousy. The other governors and satraps, threatened by Daniel's rise, began to scheme. They searched for flaws, corruption, neglect, scandal, anything to tarnish his name. But they found nothing, not a bribe taken, not a command neglected. Daniel's life was clean, his work flawless. And so they changed their tactic. "We shall not find any fault with this Daniel," they said, "unless we find it concerning the law of his God." If Daniel had a weakness, it was prayer. 3 times a day, every day without fail, he turned his face toward Jerusalem and prayed to his God. It was not for show. It was his lifeline, his discipline, his worship. The conspirators devised a trap. They approached King Darius with flattery. "O king, live forever," they began. "We've agreed that you should establish a royal statute. For the next 30 days, anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Sign the decree according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." Blinded by ego and unaware of the trap, Darius signed the law, and Daniel heard of it. He could have hidden, he could have delayed his prayers or closed his windows. But Daniel did not flinch. Just as before, he went to his upper room. He opened his windows toward Jerusalem. He knelt down on his knees, and he prayed. It was not defiance, it was devotion. The conspirators rushed to the king with glee. "Have you not signed a decree, O king?" they asked, pretending concern, "that anyone who prays to any god but you shall be thrown to the lions?" "Yes," the king answered, "the matter is established." "Then know this," they said, "Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show regard for you, O king. He prays 3 times a day." The king's face fell. In that moment he realized the plot. He had not been honored, he had been used. and the one he respected most now faced death because of it. All day Darius tried to find a loophole, a way to save Daniel, but the law of the Medes and Persians could not be undone. At sundown, the king had no choice. Daniel was brought to the lion's den. Before he was lowered in, Darius looked into his eyes and said, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." A stone was rolled over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his signet ring, and Daniel was left in the darkness, surrounded by lions. That night the palace was quiet. No music, no feasting, no rest. Darius could not sleep. He fasted. He paced. The hours dragged like centuries. At first light he rushed to the den. Standing at the edge he called out, not in doubt but in hope, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" And then, an answer from the depths, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm." Joy burst from the king's soul. He ordered Daniel to be lifted out immediately. No wound was found on him, not even a scratch. His faith had protected him. Then justice turned. Those who had plotted Daniel's death were brought to the same den they had prepared for him, along with their families, and before they even reached the floor, the lions overpowered them. The mouths once shut by angels were now unleashed, and Darius, the king who had signed the deadly law, now signed a new decree. To all peoples, nations, and languages of the earth he wrote, "I make a decree that men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, steadfast forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed. His dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. And he has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." So Daniel prospered. In a foreign land, under foreign kings, in the face of death, because his trust was never in titles or kings or decrees, but in the unchanging faithfulness of his God. The courts of kings had grown silent. The lion's den was behind him. The wars and rulers of Babylon and Persia had come and gone. Daniel, now older, stood on the edge of something deeper, something not just historical but eternal. What lay ahead was not for public courts or royal halls. What he would see next would not be shouted from palace balconies. It would be whispered in visions and dreams, mysteries written in symbols, known only to those whose eyes God had opened. In the first year of King Belshazzar's reign, before the fall of Babylon, before the night the writing appeared on the wall, Daniel lay in his bed, and God pulled back the curtain between heaven and earth. In the night the wind stirred. Daniel saw a great sea, vast, dark, and churning with chaos. From the depths of that sea rose 4 monstrous beasts, each unlike the other, each bearing power and terror. The first beast appeared like a lion, but it had the wings of an eagle. As Daniel watched, its wings were torn off. It stood on 2 feet like a man, and the heart of a man was given to it. Then came the second beast, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, with 3 ribs clenched in its mouth between its teeth. A voice spoke, "Arise, devour much flesh." A third followed, swift like a leopard, but with 4 wings on its back and 4 heads. Dominion was given to it. Then came the fourth. It was terrifying, beyond description. It was not like the others. It had iron teeth, crushing and devouring everything in its path. It trampled with ferocity. It had 10 horns on its head. As Daniel stared, a smaller horn emerged among the 10, pushing 3 others out of the way. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth that spoke arrogantly, boasting, defying. Then the vision changed. Suddenly thrones were set in place. The air shifted. A holy fire burned through the atmosphere, and one, ancient and eternal, took his seat, the Ancient of Days. His clothing was white as snow, his hair like pure wool, his throne flames of fire, its wheels a blazing fury. A river of fire flowed from before him. Thousands upon thousands served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the court was seated. The books were opened. Daniel watched breathless. The horn on the 4th beast kept speaking, louder, more arrogant. But then judgment came. The beast was slain, its body destroyed and cast into burning flame. The dominion of the other beasts was taken away. They were allowed to live for a season, but their rule was broken. Then, through the clouds of heaven, came one like a son of man. He approached the Ancient of Days and was brought before him, and to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, one that would never pass away, one that would never be destroyed. All people, all nations, all languages would serve him, and Daniel, trembling, awoke, shaken to his bones. He approached one of the heavenly attendants in the vision and asked for understanding. "The four great beasts," the angel said, "are four kings who shall rise from the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess it forever and ever." Daniel pressed further. "What of the fourth beast?" he asked. "The one that devoured with iron teeth and bronze claws? The one that was different, dreadful?" The angel answered, "The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom. It will devour the whole earth, crush it and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise, and after them shall arise another, different from the first ones. He shall speak words against the Most High, wear out the saints, and intend to change times and laws. But his rule will be for only a time, times and half a time. Then judgment shall come. His dominion shall be taken away, consumed and destroyed forever, and the kingdom, the greatness of the kingdoms under all heaven, shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers shall serve and obey him." Daniel's head swirled with what he had seen. Though the interpretation was given, the weight of it was heavy. He didn't fully understand it all, but he wrote it down faithfully, just as he had received it. He had seen more than beasts. He had seen the final rise and fall of empires. He had seen the collision between the arrogance of men and the judgment of God. He had seen the saints oppressed and the wicked exalted, but only for a time. Above all, he had seen the Son of Man, a figure divine yet human, receive the kingdom from the hand of the Ancient of Days. And that kingdom would never fall. It was the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign. Babylon still glittered under his rule, but its foundations had already begun to tremble. Daniel, burdened by what he had seen in the previous visions, received yet another revelation, this time even more detailed, more specific, and more piercing in its meaning. God was not done speaking. The future was still unfolding before the prophet's eyes. This time, the vision took Daniel not to the plains of Babylon, but to a place called Susa, the capital of the Persian Empire yet to come. In the vision, he stood beside the Ulai Canal, and as he lifted his eyes, he saw a ram. It had 2 horns, both high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. The ram charged westward, northward, and southward. No beast could stand before it, and no one could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and grew great. As Daniel watched the ram's dominance, a new figure burst onto the scene, a male goat rushing from the west so fast that its feet barely touched the ground. The goat had a single horn between its eyes, sharp and proud. It came with fury and rage and struck the ram with such force that both its horns were broken. The ram was hurled to the ground and trampled. No one could save it. The goat had overcome. But then something strange happened. The goat, now great and exalted, saw its single horn broken off, and in its place, 4 notable horns rose toward the 4 winds of heaven. From one of them emerged a little horn, small at first, but growing exceedingly great toward the south, east, and toward the beautiful land, Israel. This horn became arrogant, magnifying itself even to the prince of the host. It removed the regular sacrifices. It cast down the sanctuary. It threw truth to the ground and prospered, deceptive, defiant, and destructive. Daniel heard a holy voice speaking to another in the vision, asking, "How long shall the vision be, concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression that makes desolate, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?" The answer came, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed." The vision overwhelmed Daniel. He did not understand it, but even in his confusion, God sent clarity. A voice from heaven called out, "Gabriel, make this man understand the vision." The angel approached Daniel, and as he came near, Daniel fell on his face, trembling. But Gabriel touched him gently and began to explain. "This vision concerns the time of the end," he said. "The ram you saw with 2 horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. The male goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn is its first king." Daniel's breath caught. These were kingdoms not yet on the scene, their power still unborn. Gabriel continued, "The 4 horns that arose after the first was broken represent 4 kingdoms that shall rise from the nation, but not with its former strength. And in the latter part of their rule, when rebellion has grown full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark riddles shall arise. He will be powerful, but not by his own power. He will destroy fearfully. He will prosper and thrive. He will destroy the mighty and the holy people. He will use deceit to succeed. In his heart he will become proud, and he will rise up against the Prince of Princes, but he will be broken, though not by human hands." Daniel's heart was heavy. The angel had spoken of kingdoms that would rise like beasts and break like glass. He had spoken of rulers who would cast truth to the ground, who would exalt themselves as gods, and who would trample the sanctuary of the Most High. And yet, each one would fall. Daniel fainted and was sick for days after the vision. Though he resumed his duties in the king's court, the vision burned in his spirit. He was troubled. He had seen glimpses of empires not yet born, battles not yet fought, and desecrations not yet committed. He had seen what would come and what must be endured. But more than that, he had seen that evil, though it prospers for a time, will never last. And in the end, the Prince of Princes will rise, not just to rule over empires, but to cleanse the sanctuary, to restore what was lost, and to bring justice that cannot be undone. The years had passed like the turning of dry pages in an ancient book. Empires shifted, thrones changed hands, and Daniel, the prophet who had stood before kings and seen visions that burned through the corridors of time, now turned not to politics or palaces, but to prayer. He had been reading, not dreams, not angelic messages, but scrolls, specifically the writings of the prophet Jeremiah. In those sacred lines, Daniel discovered something that struck his heart with sudden clarity. The exile, the 70 years of desolation in Jerusalem, was nearing its end. The time that God had appointed for judgment was almost complete. But Daniel did not respond with relief or celebration. He responded with repentance. The vision of restoration did not prompt passivity. It awakened urgency. Daniel knew that God's promises were never apart from God's people, and so he fell on his knees, clothed not in prophetic authority, but in sackcloth and ashes. He fasted, he wept, he confessed, not only for himself, but on behalf of an entire nation that had forgotten their God. His voice rose in trembling reverence. "O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps covenant and mercy with those who love him and keep his commandments, we have sinned, we have committed iniquity, we have done wickedly and rebelled. We have turned aside from your commandments and judgments." He did not defend the people. He did not sugarcoat their history. He laid it bare. "To us belongs shame of face," he said, "to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, because we have sinned against you." Daniel knew that their suffering was not random. It was just. God had warned them. Prophet after prophet had cried out, but the people had refused to listen. Still, Daniel's prayer was not without hope. "To the Lord our God belong mercy and forgiveness," he whispered. "O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, listen and act. Do not delay, for your own sake, my God, for your city and your people are called by your name." Before he had even finished speaking, something happened. A presence, a light, a voice from heaven. Suddenly the angel Gabriel, the same messenger from the previous vision, appeared, swift, radiant, and sent with divine urgency. "Daniel," he said, "I have come to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your prayer, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, you are greatly beloved." Greatly beloved. Not because Daniel had interpreted dreams, not because he had faced lions, but because he had sought God with a pure heart, in fasting, in repentance, in longing for mercy. Then came the revelation, a prophecy unlike any other. 70 weeks, Gabriel said, are determined for your people and for your holy city. But these were not weeks of days. They were weeks of years, 490 years, divinely appointed to unfold God's ultimate redemptive plan. Gabriel outlined the purpose: to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Then came the timeline. From the going forth of the command to rebuild Jerusalem, there would be 7 weeks and then 62 weeks, a total of 69 weeks, or 483 years, until Messiah, the Prince, would come. The city would be rebuilt in troubled times. But then, something unexpected. The Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself, and after that, the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War and desolation will be determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, the final 7 years. But in the middle of that week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Daniel was still. The words hung in the air like fire and smoke. They spoke of hope and horror, of a coming Messiah and a city yet to be shattered again. They spoke of a Holy One who would be cut off, a phrase soaked in pain, and of a covenant to be confirmed, only to be broken by desecration. It was a vision of redemption and warning, of a king who would come not to conquer by sword, but to be wounded for sins not his own. The 70 weeks were not just numbers, they were a map pointing toward the coming of Christ, the judgment of Jerusalem, and the culmination of all things. Daniel had prayed for mercy, and God had answered. But the mercy would come through blood, through a Messiah, through a sacrifice that ended all sacrifices. The plan was unfolding, not in the courts of kings, but in the heart of heaven. And Daniel, the beloved, had been shown the mystery. The river Tigris flowed gently that day. The air was heavy with stillness, yet Daniel's spirit was not at rest. For 3 full weeks he had been mourning, fasting from rich food, meat, and wine. He had not anointed himself, nor sought comfort. His soul had become a vessel of yearning, emptied of worldly noise, listening only for heaven. Then, on the 24th day of the 1st month, as he stood by the riverbank, he looked up, and his eyes met glory. A man stood before him, not a man of earth, but a being of light, clothed in linen, girded with a belt of gold from Upaz, his body like beryl, his face like lightning, his eyes like flames of fire. His arms and feet gleamed like burnished bronze, and his voice sounded like a multitude of rushing waters. Daniel fell to the ground. Though those with him did not see the vision, terror overcame them, and they fled. Daniel was left alone, trembling. Strength drained from his body, his knees gave way. Yet as he fell into a deep sleep on his face, a hand touched him, a gentle hand. "Daniel, man greatly beloved," the voice said again, "understand the words I speak to you. Stand upright, for I have now been sent to you." And he stood, though barely. The messenger revealed why he had come, not merely to bring knowledge, but to peel back the veil of the unseen war. "From the first day you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before God," the angel said, "your words were heard, and I have come because of them. But for 21 days the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." Daniel, stunned, realized that spiritual warfare was unfolding in parallel to earthly kingdoms. Persia had its king on the throne, but behind that king was a spiritual power, a prince of darkness, resisting the purposes of God. And behind Daniel's prayer stood angels and archangels contending in heavenly places. The angels strengthened Daniel, speaking peace into his heart. Then he began to unveil a revelation of breathtaking scope, a vision of what was to come, a prophecy that would stretch across centuries, kingdoms, betrayals, wars, and the final conflict of all ages. He spoke of kings from Persia, 4 in number, who would arise, with the fourth stirring the wrath of the west. Then would come a mighty king, swift and powerful, clearly a shadow of Alexander the Great, whose kingdom would shatter and divide into four, not passed to his descendants but to others, just as the earlier vision of the goat had foretold. From there the story intensified. The angel described an endless clash between the king of the north and the king of the south, likely the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires, battling over generations. Armies would rise, alliances would form through deceit and marriage, and Jerusalem would find itself crushed between empires like a stone between grinding wheels. The prophecy poured forth with astonishing accuracy, foretelling rulers, betrayals, broken covenants, and the rise of one fierce and blasphemous king. He would defile the temple, exalt himself as God, stop the daily sacrifices, and speak monstrous things against the Most High. He would deceive with flattery and corrupt many. But those who knew their God would stand firm. They would suffer. They would fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. Yet in their suffering they would refine like gold in fire, made ready for what was to come. This time of hardship would not be the end, but the beginning of the final days. And then, the vision climbed beyond history into the realm of the end of time. The angel spoke of a king who would do according to his will, exalting himself above all gods, honoring a foreign deity of war, dividing the land for gain. Yet his fall would come swiftly, and none would help him. And then Daniel was shown something eternal. At that time the angel said, "Michael shall arise, the great prince who stands watch over your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as has never been since there was a nation, until that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name is found written in the book." And Daniel saw resurrection. Many who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. But then the angel instructed Daniel, "Seal the words of this book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." Daniel looked and saw two others, angels, standing on either side of the river. One asked, "How long shall it be till the end of these wonders?" And the answer came, "It shall be for a time, times and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, then all these things shall be finished." Daniel heard, but did not understand. "My Lord," he asked softly, "what shall be the end of these things?" And the answer came with tenderness, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white and refined. But the wicked shall do wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." The final numbers were given, 1,290 days, then 1,335 days, markers of waiting, testing, and perseverance. Then came the final word, "But you, Daniel, go your way until the end, for you shall rest, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days." Thus ended the visions of Daniel. He had stood in the courts of kings and in the courts of heaven. He had faced beasts and angels, fire and lions. He had seen kingdoms crumble and eternity unveiled. And yet, the final instruction was quiet, not to conquer, not to calculate, but simply to remain faithful until the end. He would sleep, and one day he would rise. And so will we. The pages of Daniel's life turn slowly now, and as the final words fade, a quiet awe lingers. He was taken from Jerusalem as a young boy, torn from the temple, his family, his homeland. He watched his city fall. He walked through Babylon's gates not as a prince, but as a prisoner. Yet in chains he carried a kingdom not made by hands. He never returned to Jerusalem, never walked those familiar streets again. Yet he lived his life facing it, 3 times a day, in prayer, in exile, in hope. Though the world changed around him, though kings rose and fell, though lions roared and angels flew, Daniel remained, anchored in the presence of God. What began as a book of courtly wisdom became a gateway into eternity. Daniel lived faithfully in the present, but saw far beyond it. Through dreams, visions, angelic visitations, and trembling nights, he was given glimpses of beasts and empires, horns and judgments, desecrations and deliverances. He saw the rise of Persia and Greece before they ever marched into history books. He saw the desecration of the temple before it ever happened. He saw kings boast like gods and fall like men. And he saw a kingdom coming, one not built by human hands, but by the will of heaven. That kingdom was his true home. He had seen a stone cut from the mountain, crushing the empires of men. He had seen a Son of Man riding on the clouds, approaching the Ancient of Days, receiving dominion and glory forever. He had seen a resurrection, bodies rising from the dust, some to everlasting life, others to shame. And he had heard a whisper from eternity itself, "Go your way, Daniel. You will rest, and then you will rise." The book of Daniel is not just prophecy. It is a call to live with integrity in a world that compromises, to pray when laws forbid it, to believe when visions terrify, to trust when lions surround, to hope when exile feels endless, to remain holy when kingdoms fall into ruin. Daniel never sought greatness, he simply sought God. And in return, he saw what no earthly eyes could see: the end of time, the fall of the proud, the rise of the saints, and the coming of the everlasting King. The book is sealed no longer. The time draws near, and the voice that once spoke to Daniel now speaks again to you. Stand firm. Stay faithful. Look up. For the same God who shut the mouths of lions, who judged Babylon, who raised up kings and brought them low, who revealed the Messiah and foretold the end, still reigns, and his kingdom will never pass away.